Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining the webinar today. Today we will be talking about how to configure your S-Series PBX as well as your network environment to make sure that your system can make remote connection. So this is our topic today. I believe I will offer you some very useful information. Hopefully you will enjoy the webinar today. So as usual, before we actually get started, I'd like to make sure that every one of you can hear me fine. So I'd like to ask a favor from you. If you do hear me, please give me a reply through the chatting panel of GoToWebinar. Okay, thank you so much for your cooperation. If you do hear me, please let me know. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you so much for your reply. It seems like you can all hear me clearly. Then let's get started with today's webinar. Okay, today, as I have said, our topic is to make a remote connection with your telephone system built based on S-Series PBX. When we talk about remote connection, actually, we mean an interface where you have opened so your telephone system can be connected to the public internet, through which you can realize connection for your remote extensions. That is to say, perhaps your IP phone in your house or your remote extension like your mobile phones, or you can also realize connection for your PBX, that is to say for other telephone system in other location. Perhaps you have a branch office, you have a factory that you would like to connect to your headquarters. That's totally that's totally applicable. That's totally okay. Workable for S-Series PBX, and today we are going to show you how you can do this. Okay, as I have said, people will need remote extension, especially when they need more flexibility or they need to expand the range with which they use their telephone system, right? So as I have said, people will use this for branch office integration. With branch office integration, in fact, we are connecting two PBX together. This way, we are actually connecting two telephone system as one across the internet through internet. So it can be cross-region connection, because it's connected by internet. In this example, we can totally connect our office in the US and our office in China through internet. And with this kind of integration with two systems, we can totally make free calls between offices. That is to say, if the US office employees wants to call our China office, usually they will have to make a long-distance international call. That will be very expensive. But if you have connected the PBXs on both sides together through internet, all they have to do is to make a phone call between extensions over two places. That will be considered an internal phone call between PBX. You can go through service provider and go directly from PBX to PBX through internet. So this way you don't have to pay anything for this kind of call. And if you have a company like this, in different locations, this kind of settings and configuration can save you a lot of money. with the phone bill. Okay, and then you can also share local trunk to other office. So that's very easy to understand because the two PBX is connected through internet, so they are practically linked as one. So the trunk in the PBX of China office can also be used by the extensions in the US office. So if the people in your US office needs to make a phone call, not to the China office now, not to their employees, but to perhaps their clients, your associates in China. Well, normally they would also have to make a long distance international call. They use an US line to call a China number. That's very expensive, but they can also still use this, make advantage of your PBX system. You can send your call from your US office PBX to your China office PBX and make the phone call through the trunks connected to the China office PBX. So you have totally skipped the international part. All you are making is a domestic internal phone call in China. That's way more cheap than an international phone call from US to China. Okay, and then of course, because we have two offices, people may have to do conference calls from time to time. And if you use our PBX conference call system, well, you can surely very easily make conference call between two offices, and as it only go through the internet, and go through the internal system we have built between our US office PBX and China office PBX. It will be totally free. And as I have said, people will also use it for remote extension. So that's very easy to understand. If you are not in the office, if you use only a traditional PBX system, if you're not in the office, when someone call your office phone, or perhaps the desktop phone in your office, right? Someone call this number and you are not there. You will miss this call, no matter how. But with remote extension, you can actually register your mobile phone to this extension number, or you can have your the IP phone in your house linked to this extension number, and have this extension number registered remotely through the internet to this PBX. This way, when someone make a phone call to your office number, your mobile phone or the IP phone in your house, or if you use a computer with a soft phone, that's also okay, will ring, and you will be able to answer the call when you're not in the office. So this is remote extension. People use these functions a lot, especially with the with the development of smartphones. So this is also a very useful function. And what we do today, as I have said, is to explain how to set up your system to make sure we can work with this kind of remote connection. Okay, now let's get started. Okay. The first thing you need to do to set up the telephone system with the remote extension is to open an interface to internet. Well, this is very, very easy to understand, because if you have normally you have a PBX. Well, you have your extensions, or that is to say, your IP phones or your analog phones registered to this PBX, right? Very easy to understand. And then you have a SIP trunk, usually offered by a service provider. So this is your telephone system, and normally it works fine. And if you need, you can also connect your your PBX to the router you use for internet resource. So your PBX will have access to the internet. But this is normally you don't have to do this because without the internet, only with a SIP trunk or other kinds of trunks or telephone system will work perfectly fine, because you have a trunk where you can make and receive outside phone calls, and then you have extensions registered, and so you can make internal phone calls. That's totally okay for you. But when you need to have a remote connection, or you need to connect to PBX in other places, or you need to connect to a remote extension, perhaps your mobile phone, you will need to make sure that there is an open port to the public network on your PBX system, so the external devices can connect to your telephone system through this port. So this is the very first thing we need to do. Here we have divided the possible network environment that you might encounter when you install a series PBX. So firstly, let's see. People may have a static public IP address, or most service provider, when they give you a internet line, they would give you by default a dynamic public IP address. In many countries, if you need a static public IP address, it will cost you quite some money, and so a lot of company won't consider acquire a static public IP address. Well, because all of us know IP address is a limited resource. If you take a static IP address, of course, you are taking a part of the part of resource for the whole world. Oh, naturally, you will need to pay. This is real. This is reasonable. So, if you have a static public IP address, that is a that is like the address to your house. You have a static, non-change address to your house. So anybody with this address will be able to find your house. With static public IP address, then anybody on the internet can visit your system with this public IP address. So if you have a public IP address, your internet service provider, the ISP, here we actually mean internet service provider. So the internet service, you can directly get your network, your internet connected to the PBX. We support PPPoE, and you can directly have this line connected to the PBX. Well, that's one situation, and more likely people will at least add one router before their PBX. Well, so that they can actually have some extensions, some IP phones connect to the system, or perhaps they have the router is also connected to other devices, right? If it's Wi-Fi, then then if the router support Wi-Fi, then the employees' mobile phone, their laptop, all will be registered to this router. So all will be connected to this router. So more likely you will have the internet service provider's line with, and after that you will have your router. That's our situation B, and behind the router you connect your PBX. Okay, well, if you have a client with dynamic public IP address, then that's the same issue. Well, the line can be also directly connected to the PBX, even though they don't have an static public IP address. Well, the IP address will get changed from time to time, but you can also directly connect it to the PBX. Or you can have the line, you then connect it to the router, then after that the PBX. So that's our situation D. So these are the 4 possible situations that you might encounter when you install a PBX: static public IP, dynamic public IP. Okay, for different kinds of network environment, you will need to do different things to open the interface. Now let's go through them one to one. Okay, if you have the situation B, that is static IP address service the internet line directly to the PBX, then congratulations, you don't have to do anything. The PBX is already connected to the public internet, and the port is right there, directly to the PBX. Well, this is very unlikely choice, but it's possible, and I have to say, it's insanely dangerous. So people can just go through your system very easy, because you have static IP address. It is connected directly to your telephone system. You will have a lot of hackings or fraud calls. No, but if your client decide they want to do it this way, then less work for you. Okay. In situation B, the IP address is still static, but you have a router. So the PBX is behind a router, and at the same time, other equipment might be connected to the router as well. So what you need to do here is to do a port forward, to forward a port for this to this PBX. This way, you will, because if someone visits the static public IP address, they actually get to the router. That is to say, they are in front of that is like they are in front of a big building with like 10 floors, right? They know your PBX is right in this building, but they don't know which floor, they don't know which room it is located. They have to find this out. So with the port forward, you are giving them which floor you are in, the number of your room, so they can go through your router and directly find your PBX very easily. And they don't need DDNS. What DDNS? Because the public IP address is static. It doesn't change at all, so you don't need to set any DDNS. That's very easy to understand. And then we have dynamic public IP address. So I will put it very simple here. When it comes to if your client use dynamic public IP address, you will have to set DDNS. Well, because if it's a dynamic public IP address, then as I have said, the public IP address will get changed from time to time. You will need DDNS service to convert the changing dynamic public IP address to one virtual IP address, but it's static, through which visitors outside your telephone system, outside your network system, can get to your internal network through this fake. Let's say fake. Maybe it's not technically accurate, but it's easy to understand, and it's not that wrong. So let's say fake. Your fake static IP address. So if your client use dynamic public IP address, most people have that. You will have to set DNS for this. And as I have said, if the client have their telephone line, have their internet line directly connected to the PBX, then you don't need to forward any port. No, that's just it. You set DNS in your PBX, and that's okay. That's it. But if they have a router, then you will have to do 2 things. Firstly, you will need to forward ports. So the outside equipment, visitors can go through your router, and among all the equipment that is connected to the router, they can accurately find the PBX, which is their destination if they want to visit your telephone system to register and make phone calls. And you need to set DDNS, right? Okay, so this is the basic stuff, and I believe some of you is already pretty familiar with that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about DDNS settings. If you have your PBX directly connected to the internet, the provider's line, and of course you need to set DDNS in your PBX, because, well, only your PBX can do that. Then our PBX also supports DDNS service, but you need to get the service from a third-party service provider who just offer DDNS services. Well, that's very easy to find. That's very easy to find out. Here in our company, we use dynds.org. That's our DDNS server. You purchase for service from them, and you will get your DDNS. You can set it right in the PBX. But if you have a router set before your PBX, then you need to make sure if your router supports DDNS. If your router has integrated with DDNS function, we suggest that you set DDNS in your router. So this way, you don't need to set anything in your PBX. And as for nowadays, most of the routers a company would purchase has already integrated with DDNS configurations. So, but you can set it in routers. But if you don't want to, or your client's router don't really come with DDNS function, then you can set it in our PBX. As I show you in this presentation, you find it in the system page in network. You will find DDNS settings, and just put everything in here. You click save, and that's it. So this is how you set DDNS in PBX. You purchase from a DDNS provider. You put in everything in your PBX or in the router if an router is included in the system and support DDNS. Okay, I have already covered this. If your router has been integrated with DDNS function, then you don't need to set it in your PBX. You don't have to enable DDNS in your PBX. Okay, now let's talk about port forward. I will not be able to show you how to forward a port, because that has to be operated on your router, and different people use different kinds of routers, so that's it. But I will tell, and a general IP guy can surely do this. So I won't waste too much time explaining to you how to forward a port. I will be explaining you something that you already know for a long time ago. Okay. What I will say here is there are two ports that you absolutely need to forward if you want to get remote connection and you want it to work. The first one is SIP UDP 5060, and the other one is SIP RTP 10,000 to 12,000. Those are the two ports. Those are the two ports you need to forward. And now I will open up and WebGUI, a real equipment, to explain, so I can better explain to you why we need to forward those two ports. Okay. Okay. This, as you see, this is a real equipment, and let's open up settings. And in settings, we have in PBX we find general, and now we go to SIP. Okay. Here you can actually see the two ports we need to forward: the UDP 5060 and and the RTP 10,000 and 12,000. So UDP port UDP 5060 is actually for SIP registration. When we are doing remote connection, we are registering or no matter if it is a other PBX or it is other IP phones or your mobile phone, you're actually registering this equipment to your local PBX through SIP. This is very important. So we need to have a port open for SIP registration. The UDP 5060 is our default settings, and we suggest you keep our default settings in this list. But it is changeable. If you like, you can assign another port for this. That's okay. You can change that. You can, if you have different settings in your network, or if you already used the 5060 for other stuff, well, you can use another port. That's okay. But then, if you have changed the settings here, for example, to I have changed the port here, for example, to this port. Then in the port forwarding, we have just mentioned you need to forward UDP 1001, not 5060 anymore. So essentially, we are going to forward the port, the UDP port that we use for SIP registration. This configuration will be found right here. Once again, we strongly suggest that you keep our default settings. Don't change it unless you have to. And we need to also change RTP 10,000. We need to also map out RTP 10,000 to 12,000. These ports are for audio streaming. Well, that is to say, the SIP trunk, the connection is realized through the UDP port 5060 by default. But when you are making phone calls, you are sending a data package with audios. That is our audio streaming. This will go through RTP 10,000 to 12,000. This is what will happen here. So all general data exchanges, data transmitting will go through our RTP port 10,000 to 12,000. So that is to say, if you have problem with this forward port, that means you can realize connection with the two PBX, but you cannot make any phone calls because the data transmitting would be wrong. So those are the two ports you will have to forward when you are setting, when you open and remote connection. Okay, so when we are done with all this, we have generally already opened up an interface to your public network, to the public internet, and people are. I have received some questions or some doubts about this, because once you open an interface to the public network, that means possible risk of being hacking, or as I have said, fraud calls, because when you don't have any access, when you block your door, with bricks or fences, it is safe because outside world don't have any access to your house. But if you need to communicating to the world, you need to open the door and tear up your fences. That is our internet. That is one interface in your local network to the public network. So danger may come. You will have a risk of being hacked through this port. Like when you have a door, if you have a house without a door or have the door blocked, well, you know you're safe in there. But if you open a door, will possibly thief or thief might get in, right? So people want to people want to block the interfaces, other interfaces, to avoid hacking as possible as they can, and only leave the ports that they use to make incoming and outgoing phone calls. When you only use SIP trunk or other internet for this, other ports for only for making phone calls, it's possible. But as for now, if you have a public interface to the network, yes, of course, you can set your firewall rules. You can set your auto defense rules in our PBX. But that's, according to our experience, that's not enough. That's really not enough, because hackings can go through your system. They can go through your through extension. They can go through right through. They can go from right through the extension. That's how technology has come has advanced to, and that's how far the technology has advanced to, and we cannot totally avoid this. But as I have already, I think you already know that we support VPN, so our PBX can work as a VPN server. So you can enable a VPN server in your PBX to ensure the security here. So if you use your PBX as a VPN server, other PBX as a VPN client, or one PBX as a VPN server, and other IP phones or other mobile phone as VPN client, you have secured your system pretty well. So, with VPN, you cannot avoid people getting into your system, but when they get in, they cannot understand a thing happened in your system, because it's encrypted, pretty tight. Okay, so I took a few minutes to explain the security. Because what we have here is a PBX. It's not a hardware firewall. You have to understand that. If we can integrate a hardware firewall, but that will mean that this PBX will cost way too much. That's probably not very good idea for business. So for this, so we have VPN. We have firewall rules, so you can secure your system pretty well. But as I have said, I need to explain this again. Firewall rules, if you have already forward interface in your router, the firewall rules and the firewall and auto defense it will work, but you will need some other ways to really secure your PBX. Well, okay. Let's move to the next part. Set NAT for remote extension. Well, this is very important. If you try to use the interface you just opened for remote extensions, then you need to set NAT. Okay, now let's get back to our PBX to see how to really set up your NAT. Okay. Let's go to our PBX. Okay, so firstly, in this same page, you see SIP. After general, you actually see NAT. So with NAT actually means network address transmission. Network address translation. That will make sure that the equipment in your local network that only have a local IP address can visit your, for example, your router with the public IP address to communicate to other equipments in the public internet. So we need to set NAT here. So by default, it is disabled. Well, you will need, if you want to use NAT, you will need to enable NAT type. Here, well, with NAT, we have actually 3 options for you. The first one is STUN, the external IP address, or external host. Well, you can have your own STUN server. You probably will find a STUN server over the internet. It can be free. It can you can purchase STUN service as well. You putting the STUN server address here, and that's our STUN service. It's not what we are going to talk about today, because you still need your client to purchase STUN. So if they don't have STUN, and that will be a problem, right? So here we have stun.yastar.com. You can use that for sure, but you probably will need a more stable local STUN service. Because our server, because for STUN it's very important the STUN server being stable. So we offer you this one. If you can just keep the default settings. You can connect to our STUN server, of course, and if you have your own STUN service, that's okay. But what we're going to talk about here today is external IP address. This is what we have been done here. Okay, so firstly, we need to put in external IP address. If you have static external IP address, then you just put in your external IP address. That's it. And if you don't have an static IP address, the DNS server will offer you one, as I have said, a virtual static IP address. So this is the one that we are using here. This is the one we are using here for this example. You put in the IP address. This is the IP address you get from a DNS server, and the port. The port actually is the forward port to the UDP 5060 or any other ports you have changed for SIP registration. We have just mentioned this. In this router, the port is 7010. So here you put 7010, but this port is forward to 5060. You need to know that. Okay, and then after this, here you have local network identification. So let's see. With the local network identification, you actually defined the segment of your local network. Then any data exchange, any visits from this segments you sit here will be considered local network. But of course, you can change it a little bit so you can make sure that your local communication is easier. So if you have changed it to 00, then your segment the limitation will be way wider than here. Okay. Than the former one. Okay. And of course, you can add more than one identification if you have multiple segments for a local network. Well, you can set this, you can set them all here. And in NAT mode, we have actually 4 mode: yes, no, never, or route. Okay, well, here we have give you a very clear explanation. So in yes mode, you use NAT and ignore the address information in the SIP/STP headers and reply to the sender's IP address or port. And if you select no, then you use NAT mode only according to the RFC 3581. But in never mode, you would in never mode, never attempt NAT mode or RFC 3581 support. But in route, you use NAT but do not include port in headers. So, our port in headers. So, well, in general, in NAT mode, if you use external IP address, you can choose accordingly. We support that you set yes. Okay, you click save, then you have finished the NAT settings. But it's not over. You need to still go to extensions and open up NAT for the extensions that you want to use for remote extension. So I will use this extension 1000, and in advanced, here we have NAT and register remotely. You need to they are enabled by default. You can just check them to enable the extension. Okay, so this is the NAT settings. Very easy to understand. Okay, if you have done everything here, you can register your remote extension to your PBX. So all you have to do is to put in the virtual IP address you get from the DNS or the static IP address you have acquired from your service provider. You put all the informations to the your remote equipment, your IP phone, your soft phone, your smartphone, and well, they will realize this registration automatically. So that's just it. You have finished everything in your PBX side. You put everything. You put once again. You put your IP address, well, your registration name. So everything here in the extension settings to your in your remote terminal, and that's it. So the registration name and the registration password. Here you have to remember those 2 things to make to do remote registration here. Okay, that's it. And if you use our Linkas app for mobile phone connection, for mobile phone registration, then you will need to use the user password. This is the password for user login. You use only this word for user registration. Okay. We have done with the we have the extension. Now we are going to talk about how you can set how you can connect to other PBX. So this is what I have said. You do peer-to-peer registration for remote PBX. So when you are connecting 2 PBX together, as I have said, we open a port in your network so outside equipment can visit this equipment. And when it comes to 2 PBX, you will still have to forward those ports, of course, and you can do all you need to do is to register the 2 ports to each other as an SIP trunk. So this is how you make the registration. I will show you. I will show you here. Also in this equipment. So in settings we have trunks. We can add a new trunk here. Okay, so in trunk type, we have register trunk. In register trunk mode, you will have to put in provider name, host name, IP address, domain, username, password, all those stuff. This is clearly for SIP trunk you get from a service provider. So it's not what we need right now. We find peer trunk. In peer trunk, you put in provider name, you put in the IP address, and you define the port. Okay. Let's do this. So, in provider name, this provider name is only if you are using a peer trunk, then this name can be anything you want. You can put in anything you like to make sure that you know which equipment it is. So you can just put anything. Let's say SPBX China. Okay, that's it. We can identify this trunk now. Now in host name, we put in the IP address. The fake IP address we get from the service provider, from the DNS provider, or the static public IP you have. Oh, it can be anything. Okay, the IP address you put in here, and here, as we have already forwarded this port 5060. Well, because as I have said, the port 5060 is for SIP registration, and we're actually registering these two equipments to each other. We need to use this port, but we need to use the port that we have forwarded. So because it's a remote connection, the forward out port for 5060. Okay, so this is the forwarded port, and of course, if you use other protocol for transmission, you need to choose accordingly here. Okay, and then we need to set the domain. You can see the information here. VoIP provider server domain name. If the provider has no domain name, viewing the IP address. We are using an IPPBX. Clearly, there are no extra domain name here. So we just put in the IP address. We click save. Now we have this SPBX trunk, and now all we have to do is to do the same thing in the other PBX with the IP address you get from your, for example, your US office, because this is the SPBX in China office, and where we have everything set it right here, and of course you have to put in all the information you get from the US office in your China office, how you like to set those things. And I do know you guys all you are very interested in how to secure your system when you have interface to public internet. And as I have said, all the settings for firewall rules and auto defense is pretty much it. It's all that we can offer for you to secure your system, and at the same time you will need to know the possible risk when you open an interface. And of course, as I have said, we offer VPN server, support VPN server in our SPBX. You can use SPBX as a VPN server to build a VPN service, a VPN network for your telephone system. That's very good. That will totally secure your system. We strongly suggest that you do this. And if you need any guide or any help on the VPN, we do have. We will arrange a webinar in a few weeks. And of course, we have menu in our website, yastart.com. You can find the VPN server menu over there as well. Okay, I think that's it. If there is anything you'd like to know, please tell me. I will give you a reply right away. Okay, thank you.